Well, hello and welcome to the Movie Paradise. I'm your host, Nathanael Molnár, and this is Movie Night Tonight. Every single week, we watch a new film and we have a spoiler discussion about that film where we go into the film in depth, with each month having a new theme. This is the first installment in our month of action science fiction films, which I'm very excited about. And the movie we are talking about tonight is 1987's Predator. I am joined by a great panel today. I have Crystal Gonzalez.
Good evening.
And Dave Scrivani.
Always a pleasure.
So let's go around real quick, per usual, and just say briefly what our initial thoughts are on the film and how many times we've seen it, starting with Crystal.
Okay, so the first time I saw this, I fell asleep halfway through. So technically, this is the first time I've seen it. And it's pretty good.
Yeah. Dave?
I have lost track of how many times I've seen Predator because it's right up there with John Carpenter's The Thing as one of my all-time favorite movies. So.
Nice. Yeah. I really like the movie personally. I'd say out of all the movies we've watched so far, this is probably my least favorite.
Okay.
But I definitely enjoy Predator a lot, and I've seen it. I don't know. I lost track, probably 5, 6, 7 times, right around there. Under 10, I would say.
I watched it at least annually, not for any specific reason. I just end up watching it at least once a year.
It's a good movie for that.
Yeah.
It's a very rewatchable film. So let's get right into it. I enjoy this film a lot, and like I said, it's probably my least favorite of the ones we've seen, but it is a classic. And if we're talking about action sci-fi films, we can't not talk about Predator. It was just so influential for all the films that came after it. And what was really interesting is I went in, like I usually do leading up to the discussion, I do a little bit of research looking at the films. And it was interesting to me how much Predator was influenced by some of the films we've watched already, specifically Alien. Now, it seems kind of a moot point to talk about Predator being influenced by Alien, considering we now live in a post-AVP world where we've had Alien vs. Predator. But if you look at 1987 and the context of when this film was created, this movie was influenced so much by not just the first Alien, but also Aliens, which came out the year before it. I was reading that when they were shipping the script around for for Predator, they were describing it as Alien in the Jungle. That's how they described the Predator. And I was like, yeah, no, I can totally see that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So then I was reading that the big influences for Predator was Aliens the year before that, also Rambo: First Blood,
right.
Which, if you look at Predator as an amalgamation between First Blood and Alien, that's your movie. That's it right there. So I wanted to start off this discussion talking a little bit about comparing and contrasting Alien and Predator, because I think there are definitely tonally as well as story-wise, there are similarities and there's also differences. And so I'm curious to open up the discussion that way.
Then we're talking about Alien, the first one. Okay.
I will hold off on talking about Aliens because usually I reveal at the end of the show, but next week's show is Aliens.
Okay.
So we'll try to avoid, in case if people are listening to these shows in like order, we'll avoid talking about Aliens in too much depth. But the first Alien.
This is a weird question because I've never really sat down to think about like those two films side by side. Because they're so different in like tone, because like Alien, very clearly a horror film.
Yeah.
Predator, very clearly an action film. Well, but it does have horror elements, like very similar to Alien. Predator, if you take away all like the testosterone and machismo, I don't know if that's the pronunciation of that word, but if you take all that away, it's a slasher movie.
Yeah.
Just in the jungle. And I think that is definitely a takeaway from Alien that John McTiernan had, for sure.
Yeah. I think where you can find similarities and differences between the two is that I think if you look at the story structure, they're very much the same.
Yeah.
You have a group of people who encounter some sort of alien entity that they don't know, alien both being extraterrestrial and alien also being something that they don't understand in the terms of how I just said it. Some sort of alien entity, and they're picked off one by one until you have one left that goes up against one-on-one with aliens. So you see story similarities, but where they differ is tonally, I think, because you have, like you were mentioning, Dave, you have Alien, which is a very clear horror science fiction film. There are definitely moments of action and adventure, but it's mostly horror. Whereas with Predator, you have moments of horror, but it's mostly action and adventure. But for two films to have share a lot of the same DNA in terms of the narrative that they've crafted and the story structure, but for the tones to be so completely different, I think that's really interesting to look at them side by side as almost companion pieces in that way.
Yeah, because I didn't see, that they have, very similarities, similar things to them until I watched them,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is basically almost the same thing, but different tone. I'm like, all right.
When you look at Predator, it really is Alien in the jungle.
Yeah.
That's such a perfect explanation of the film. And so I think that's interesting, and it would be interesting to see how people would talk about the movies Alien and Predator if they didn't cross them over. If they were just two separate films, how would we talk about Alien and how would we talk about Predator? I think that'd be interesting, but I feel like people don't necessarily compare those first two films in the degree that we are right now.
Definitely not.
Because they were crossed over like that.
Yeah. Well, I think the reasoning for that, and I'm not going to get too deep into it, but I think it was very early on that Dark Horse Comics started the whole Alien versus Predator thing in the comics.
Yeah.
And that just evolved over time into the two movies we got, crossing those two over. So I think it was inevitable that was going to happen at some point because of Dark Horse, but I don't know,
Well, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the crossover in the comics came from Predator 2, where and I haven't seen Predator 2, but I was reading that in Predator 2 they find a xenomorph skull.
Yeah, near the end, when Danny Glover goes into finds the Predator ship, there's a whole wall of extraterrestrial skulls, and there's very clearly a xenomorph skull among those.
And that's
what
spawned
set the stage. Yeah.
And then we got the two films, and then now we have all the subsequent movies since. But that's interesting.
I do want to say real quick.
Yes.
I know a lot of people don't like it, but I will wholeheartedly defend Predator 2 to my grave. I watched it for the first time over the summer, and I absolutely loved it. It's dumb. It's so much fun, though.
I have not seen Predator 2.
I haven't either.
It's not good, but I love it.
Yeah, I want to watch that. I want to rewatch Predators because I remember when I saw it, when it came out, I enjoyed it for what it was, but I didn't think it was anything great. I would be interested to watch it again. I do love Adrian Brody.
I revisited both Predator 2 and Predators leading up to The Predator. This is a Fast and the Furious kind of thing where all the titles are very confusing. And Predators held up way better than I remembered.
Yeah,
but
I think maybe that movie gets people don't really appreciate it as much just because they're like, oh, it's another Predator movie.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right on that. Yeah. But we're getting too. I think we're not to derail the show or anything, but we're talking about the original Predator here.
Yeah. But so going back to the original Predator, I really like in this movie how they set up their characters and how we have such a clear group camaraderie. And again, not to dwell too much on Aliens, but that's something that Aliens did so well, was that you had these the group of characters and their back and forth and their chemistry and their dynamics, and part of that was so much fun. And then you had the aliens come into the picture, and everything changed. They kind of, when you look at Predator in the context of coming out just a year after Aliens and understanding how much of an influence both Alien and Aliens had on Predator, you can definitely see that they're going for that kind of group dynamics. And it's especially interesting when you know that the original story for Predator didn't have any of the other crew. It was just Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's Dutch.
That I did not know.
And so it's supposed to just be Dutch and the Predator, and that was it. But I think Arnold, I could be wrong in this, but I think it was Arnold who was saying that he didn't want it to be that way. He wanted other people in. And so then they wrote in all the other characters, and Arnold described it as being like he was wanting to go for a Magnificent Seven kind of dynamic amongst the group, which... This is a very different kind of Magnificent Seven, but I think when you look at it in those terms, I can totally see what they're going for. And I think that's part of what makes Predator so much fun. And it is a fun film.
For sure. Like the opening, not the opening scene, but the early on scene when they're in the helicopter going to the jungle and Little Richard's playing, it's like that is one of my favorite scenes of all time in cinema because it showcases each character's personality so well in the span of like not even 3 minutes.
Exactly.
And the script, right, like the dialogue is all so spot on.
Yeah.
It's just it's perfect in my opinion.
Yeah.
I love that scene to death.
No, they do such a great job of taking these little moments in the film and using really unique dialogue to kind of give us a sense of who these characters are without spending, like, for, like, any of the characters. We don't know any of their backstories. We don't know where they came from. We don't know anything about them. But we have a sense of who they are as people from the way that they talk. And I think that's really genius script writing, is when you can give your characters so much life just through the words that they say.
Yeah, I think the main example I would give of that is... when Blaine spits out the tobacco onto Dylan's shoe, and Dylan just goes, "It's a real nasty habit you got there." Like in that like very, deep monotonous tone. It's like that's Dylan's character.
Yeah,
like that one line.
How he handles that whole situation because we would have gotten a completely different read of his character if his reaction was to punch him in the face.
Yeah.
Or if he was like, "Oh, it's okay, man, don't worry about it," or the way he reacts to that one instance gives us such a great insight into who he is as a character, and it's important that we know who these characters are and who they are as people and what kinds of people they are when they go into the jungle and then they're put to the test.
Exactly.
So I definitely, that was something that when we watched it last night that I really picked up on was that group dynamic and how they gave life to their characters just through little moments of dialogue.
Yeah, and I don't think like a lot of movies today like really do that much. And like it's important if you're like having like that kind of group scene. And it's like like one of my favorites.
Yeah. And I think again, I want to keep myself from not going too much into Aliens, but I think I can definitely see where in Aliens they were doing something similar in Aliens, and Aliens came first. But it was more the focus on their banter was about how naive those characters were, that they weren't prepared for what was about to happen, that they were taking everything for granted. With Predator, it's different. It's just more, these are regular people, and they're going into what they think is a regular mission. And then once they're there, they find out not everything is the way they think it's going to be.
Yeah.
And then enter the Predator, which I guess is a good segue to start talking about the Predator. And I don't think, because we're so removed from when this film came out, and of course now the character of the Predator or the species of aliens is so ingrained in our pop culture that we don't really take a second to realize just how unique the Predator actually is. Because when you look at alien species in film, usually aliens are attacking, aliens are invading, or aliens are just, like in the case of Alien, the aliens are just the creepy monster to chase everyone around and kill people. What's unique about the Predator is that the Predators are hunters. They're trophy hunters specifically, and they're hunting down man. The ultimate prey is humankind. And I think that's so unique to the Predator that we don't see that anywhere else in science fiction, or at least to the best of my knowledge, in science fiction filmmaking.
Yeah, definitely not anymore. Like, most monster movies you see nowadays is like, oh, it's a monster. Yeah. And that's basically the extent you get out of that, unfortunately. And, as a big fan of monster movies, I wish that was not the case. But unfortunately, we have movies like Predator that I can just go back to and be like, there we go. That's how that. They don't make them like they used to anymore.
But I think, and it gives like a whole new dimension to the actual character of the Predator, which in these kinds of monster movies, as you were putting it, we don't necessarily think of them as characters.
Exactly.
We just think of them as the oppositional force or the threat. But in the case of this movie, we have the character of the Predator, and if you look at the movie from his perspective, it's just a predator coming to a planet, trying to collect game, trying to collect trophies, and that's it. It's for the Predator, it's no different than a person going to another country and hunting wildlife.
Exactly.
There's no difference. Like, it removes a sort of it's hard to use the word humanity when talking about an alien being, but it removes a certain element of humanity from the Predator, because for the Predator, it's not a personal thing. Take Alien, we have to wonder, what does the xenomorph think? What does the xenomorph feel? And in the case of Alien, we have to assume that the xenomorph doesn't feel anything, that it doesn't think in that kind of sense. It just is either killing for protection, for survival, or just it's bloodthirsty.
Yeah.
In the case of Predator, it's not personal why the Predator is killing everyone. It's just the same reason why a person would go to another country and shoot wildlife. It's like, oh, it's a sport. It's a game.
Yeah.
And I think that makes the Predator's actions in this film all the more unique and really stand out, and it adds so much to the character of the Predator once we understand that is where it is coming from.
That being said, the Predator in this movie, at least, kind of not great of a hunter.
No.
Up until he gets Dutch, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, by himself, he's doing great. As soon as it's just him against Dutch, I don't know what happens, man. He just loses all his steam because he lets himself get fooled so many times by Dutch. It's like, come on, man, what happened? Like, he sets off almost all of his traps. Like, there's the one at the end where he's like, oh, there's these spikes here. I'm gonna go around, and then he triggers an entirely different trap. It's like, dude, what are you doing?
See, that didn't stand out as much to me watching it. Like, it still felt like it was a battle of wits between the two. And I think the moment where where Arnold is trying to lure him in, and it's like, come on, get me. I'm not going to do an Arnold impression. I was thinking about it in my head. I was like, no, I'm not going to attempt this.
Lame.
But he was like, come on, get me. And then the Predator sees the spikes.
Yeah.
And that's the moment, I think that's the clearest moment where you realize this is an intelligent creature.
Yeah.
A lot of times, like even going back to Alien, we have a creature that is clearly skillful, instinctual, but is not necessarily like intelligent as we would define intelligence. With the Predator is an intelligent creature. It thinks things through. It has critical thinking skills, and I think that level of intelligence is shown in that scene, and I think that makes it an even more formidable creature. The fact that it can look at a situation and discern and think in the way that a human being would think. And I think it's that moment where Arnold or Dutch specifically realizes that this isn't just like an animal.
Yeah.
No, this is like almost as if he's going up against another human being.
There is that, but then there's also the scene right after Dutch splashes down into the river, and he's all covered in mud, and the Predator can't see him, but then he sees like this one little bit of warmth, and he's like, oh, it must be him. And then it's an opossum. It's like, really?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I can... if it saw, like... Because if that's all it can see is just...
True.
I could barely make out the shapes of what everything was. Like that was one thing I was noticing when Dutch and the Predator were fighting. and it kept cutting to the Predator's vision as he was fighting Dutch. I was like, how can the Predator see anything? Like
that is fair.
I can't make out anything. How is he like landing all these punches so perfectly? I was like, I can't understand what's going on. So I don't know, that's one thing. Might be a bit of a reach, but
I love the film, but I love to tear stuff like that apart. It's just me.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. But anyways, I do think the Predator is a very unique alien in terms of aliens we've seen in the history of film. And I really appreciate that about this movie. Because especially when it's taking so much direct inspiration from movies that came before. Like, oh, Alien, but in a jungle. You know? Take something that came before, just change the setting, and you have a brand new movie. The fact that it can be that kind of movie that we would view, like, if a movie came out today and it was, I don't know, like, hey, let's make Lord of the Rings, but with this twist, or with this, people would look down on it. But the fact that they can take Alien, but in a jungle. Yeah. And then it can become a classic in its own right. Yeah. I think that's because they made very specific changes and very specific additions that made it a classic. Yeah. Such as the character of the Predator being just as cool as it is.
And I don't think we can talk about how unique the Predator is without talking about its design, like as
Stan Winston.
Exactly. That is well, it's not completely Stan Winston. Mr. James Cameron was the one.
I was just reading about this. The Mandibles.
The Mandibles.
That was James Cameron.
The Mandibles and the Predator was James Cameron's idea.
He has a lot of just individual ideas in so many different movies.
He does. And I don't know if you have seen the original design for the Predator.
I don't. Maybe I did a long time ago, but I don't remember.
I have not.
It is not great looking, for one.
I can imagine.
But the original plan for the Predator was an entirely different looking creature, and it was also going to be played by Jean-Claude Van Damme.
I did know that. Didn't he? I think he filmed like 2 days, and then he was like, I'm done with this.
Yeah, there's a couple behind the scenes footage and pictures of the original Predator suit, and it does not look good. It looks very stiff, and I'm very glad they brought Stan Winston in to fix everything. Because like I said, I love monster movies. I am a firm believer in the Predator is one of the most unique, best-looking movie monsters of all time.
I would completely agree with that.
I think not only is it his face itself, but also the mask. Yeah. The mask is one of the coolest, most intimidating things I've seen on screen.
Yeah. And I think it loses its impact because watching the movie now, like if you were to watch Predator for the first time today, at some point in your life before watching Predator, you would have seen what the Predator looks like.
Yeah,
because but in 1987, when the movie came out, they never, I remember reading, they never put the Predator's face in any of the marketing. So in the trailers, all you saw was the helmet. So then in that moment where it takes off its helmet and you see what it really looks like, people went nuts seeing that because they're like, we didn't know this was going to happen. And then to see what it looks like for real, like that, it loses a little bit of its impact now because we're all so familiar with what the Predator really looks like. Right. But it's still like, it's so cool.
It really is.
Also, I looked up the original suit.
Did you?
Yeah. It's not good.
It's not good.
It's not good.
I'll take a look after the show.
I warned you.
I'm curious to watch it. Let's see it, though.
It's pretty bad, but thank God for Stan Winston.
Yep.
Yes. So another aspect of the film I want to talk about is that it seems like in the beginning it is kind of going in the way of because this is 1987. This is the height of Arnold Schwarzenegger at this point. He's doing his thing. He's got his shtick and he's doing his thing. And the movie seems like it's kind of going towards just being an Arnold movie. And then I think once you have the introduction of the Predator, then it changes course. It's not just an Arnold Schwarzenegger action movie, but it becomes something completely different. Yeah. And I liked how it kind of rode the line of being an Arnold movie because he has a couple one-liners. Stick around, like it walks the line as a film, but it never crosses over to just being an Arnold movie, as we'd put it. And I think, you kind of have to look at it in terms of today with, say, Dwayne Johnson. You have your Dwayne Johnson movies that are just capitalizing on Dwayne Johnson, and it's a Dwayne Johnson film. And then there are movies that Dwayne Johnson is in. Yeah. And there's a distinction. And I think this is kind of the same case, but with Arnold. You have your Arnold action movies, and then this is a Predator movie that has Arnold in it.
I think there's a very clear turning point in the film where it stops becoming an Arnold movie, stops being an Arnold movie rather, and becomes that something else. And I think that's right when Hawkins gets taken. Because you know something else is going on up until that point, and then that's when like all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes something entirely different from what maybe people were expecting.
Yeah.
I will say this. The film is kind of ruined by the opening shot of the spaceship coming in. I think if that had been taken out, no one would have been expecting any of that.
See, the whole that whole opening thing seems like it's a cross between Alien and The Thing.
It does. It is very Thing.
You have the you have the shot of space with all the stars, like Alien, and then you have the spaceship going through.
It's almost the exact same shot.
Yeah. So I mean, I agree. I could have done without that.
Yeah.
And I think also kind of going back to what we were talking about with the design of the Predator, it's lost on us today. It's not. Well, I don't want to say lost on us. It's not as impactful, the mystery of it all now, because when you're watching, because even if you were to watch Predator for the first time today, you'd be like, well, obviously it's the Predator. That's the thing that's chasing them, and you kind of know that. But I still think it's an effective mystery.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that really stands out about Predator, is that it is this mystery. They're trying to figure out what's going on, what's happening. And I really like that element of the film. I think they do a good job with that. Yeah. Even if we do ultimately know what it is, it's still, like, you still feel what those characters, they're, like, completely confused. They're like, we're not prepared for this. We don't know what's out there. We don't know what's going on. And it's picking us off one by one.
Yeah. I especially love the realization that Dutch comes to late in the film that it's using the trees. Like, he just had this most bewildered, terrified look on his face that he now he knows. He's like, he's really up the creek,
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And I think the one of the most effective parts of setting up the Predator and setting up the mystery is the infrared POV shots of the Predator. I love that. Now, they might have... I think there's a couple points where they overuse it, but that whole idea of just you're down there with the characters, and then all of a sudden it will cut away to something is watching them. And that's a bit of horror in of itself. Like, I think that's very well done. Yeah. That's almost like the same effect as, say, the motion tracker in Alien. Like, it has a similar kind of effect, like, wait, where is this coming from? What is this? There's something watching them, but you
have
can't
no idea what it is.
Exactly. And I really like that element of it. Again, I think it might have been overused a little bit, but I thought that was an effective way to introduce us to the Predator, or at least to let us know something was there before they actually fully introduced the creature.
Yeah. I'm curious, what scenes did you think that were, like, overused?
Well, I think there were a lot of shots of them all walking. And it would be them walking, and then it would cut to the infrared. Okay. And then it would cut to them walking, and then infrared. And it was like, all right, I get what you're going for. I get that something's there.
Let's move on.
I think you could have cut to it 3 times instead of 7 times. Like, I mean, there were a couple points like that.
Yeah.
But that's a minute thing.
Yeah.
That's not... that didn't sink the movie. I wasn't like, if only they'd done it 3 times instead of 5, this would have been a fresh.
This movie's trash now.
Exactly.
I do love the scene, the infrared POV scene, after they tear apart the gorilla village, and it goes over and grabs the scorpion. You see its hand, like, clawed. It's like, oh, what is this thing?
That's your first instance that it is, like, something not human.
Exactly.
Because for all you know, for all that before that moment, For all you know, maybe it's like a sniper or something.
Exactly,
or,
yeah.
Or, some sort of tactical soldier. But that's when you see the claws and you're like, oh, this thing isn't human.
Yeah.
And then you see it with the scorpion. I agree. That's a really great... They do a lot of, teasing out the predator.
Yeah.
I guess that's something, again, I don't know if we necessarily pick up on that because... we just understand the creature and everything now. But when you watch the film, they do a really good job of teasing it out. You don't know what is going on.
Exactly.
For most of the movie. In the same way, and the film does a really good job of putting that kind of uncertainty on the audience in the same way that the characters are feeling. It kind of mimics the mindset of the characters, which is always a good thing you want. As a film, you want to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And it's very much in the same vein as Alien. Alien does that very well as well. I did want to talk about John McTiernan.
Okay.
Because I think it's really interesting that he's a I don't think we really think of him as a classic action film director.
Yeah.
Because
but
he did Die Hard, and he did, which I think is even better than the first Die Hard with a Vengeance. That's my favorite Die Hard movie.
I'm going to be honest, I've never seen Die Hard.
Or have I?
No. Okay, so we'll have to...
I know the legend, though.
Yes, we'll have to do Die Hard at some point.
All right.
Maybe Christmas movies, we'll do Die Hard or something.
It is a Christmas movie.
I don't think it is, technically.
I've never seen it, so I wouldn't know.
Yes. It's just, it takes place during Christmas, but it's not a Christmas movie. Per se, but I think it's fun that people say that it's a Christmas movie, and if people have that as a Christmas tradition, I think that's a fun thing to do. But John McTiernan did Die Hard. He did Die Hard with a Vengeance. He did Hunt for Red October. He did Last Action Hero.
He did Last Action Hero?
Yeah,
I had no idea. I love that movie.
And I've actually never seen it.
It's fantastic.
I want to check it out.
It's wild, but it's fantastic.
Yeah. And then he's did Predator. And Predator was his second film that he did. And I think for him to do that many action films that we hold to be classics, and we don't talk about him that much as a classic action director. So if anything, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to John McTiernan and be like, hey, you're a great action director. Good job.
Is he doing anything nowadays, or? Is he even alive?
I think he's alive because when I went on his IMDb, it didn't say he was dead.
Okay.
So I'm gonna assume he's still alive.
Assume he's alive.
I don't think he's doing anything currently.
Right.
I think he's up there in age. So he probably is retired. And honestly, he's earned it.
Yeah,
so.
It is weird though that we don't think of him as like a classic action movie director. You look at people like Sam Raimi, like he is known mostly for Evil Dead. So he's a classic horror director, but he does only 3 movies really.
Yeah.
And John McTiernan, we don't talk about him that much, but he did all these amazing action movies, and he's not part of that discussion.
Yeah, and I think he deserves his due.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
He's a veteran to the genre
For sure.
And I think Predator is a great testament to that.
Yeah.
So I think I really like the contrast between I hesitate to say opening battle because it's more like probably 30-40 minutes into the movie. But that first scene of violence where you have Dutch and his crew go into the base and they wipe everyone out, and you have that big scene. And I think that's so crucial to the film because at that point it has nothing to do with the Predator. It has nothing to do with that. But you needed that scene for us to understand who these characters are, the level of damage that they can do.
How unstoppable they are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How powerful they are, how unstoppable they are. And then it makes it, once you see what they're capable of, the impact of the Predator so easily wiping all of them out means so much more. Because you've seen what they are capable of.
Yeah.
And you've seen the level of carnage that they can inflict. And then for the Predator to be able to so easily wipe them out. Yeah. And then, of course, and this stood out to me last night, when you get to the final battle between the Predator and Arnold, so much of the movie is about, all these guys, they've got their sleeves ripped off. They're big, they're buff, they're these tough. You have that infamous shot of Arnold and Carl Weathers, locking hands.
Which is a very weird handshake, by the way.
Yeah, but it fits those characters.
It looks cool, but it's just a very... Who shakes hands like that? I don't know.
But for them, like, the whole movie setting them up to be these, like, giant, ripped guys, and then the Predator looms over Arnold. Like, has at least 2 feet on Arnold.
That is because Kevin Peter Hall, who plays the Predator, is 7'3". I looked this up.
Wow.
He is he was a tall man.
Yeah.
Unfortunately passed away, I think, like, right after Predator 2 filmed.
Was he did he do the Predator?
He was the Predator in both movies, yeah.
That's good. But I think that was something that they so deliberately set up, was you have all the movie focusing on how big and buff and tough these guys are, and then as soon as they meet the Predator, like, Arnold looked tiny compared to the Predator.
I think that was definitely the point that they were trying to make. Like, they need something enormous to, make all these buff men feel small.
Exactly. And I think it even speaks to the time that it came out. You're taking Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's like the biggest, toughest guy, and then you pit him up against this thing. And how can you make your creature look more imposing than to put him up against the biggest and the toughest guy you've got in Hollywood at that moment? Like, and just have it loom over Arnold like that. Like, that is how you set up your creature. It kind of reminds me of what was going into the making of the first Terminator, where they wanted Arnold to play. I'm getting it mixed up with T2. What's the name of the guy who goes back in time and is with Sarah Connor?
Kyle Reese, is that his name?
The
guy who goes back in time to protect her.
Yes.
Yeah, Kyle Reese.
Kyle Reese. Okay. It's been so long since I've seen the first one. It has been a while since I've seen Terminator, actually. Kyle Reese. So they wanted Arnold to play Kyle Reese.
Really?
And they were like, well, now we need to find a guy who's
bigger than Arnold.
Is bigger than Arnold, and they couldn't do that.
It's like, well,
and then Arnold was like giving all these suggestions of how the Terminator should walk, how it should move. Well, because in that movie they wanted Arnold to play the good guy.
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, why not just have Arnold play the Terminator? And then history was made. And so it kind of reminds me of that. Like, you gotta get someone who's bigger than Arnold, which is tough to do. But they managed to do that with the Predator. And so when you get to that final battle, and you just see how massive the Predator is, and you see Arnold, like, he lays some punches into the Predator, and then the Predator with like one hit knocks Arnold to the ground. And it's like, wow, okay. We thought Arnold was tough, and now he's going up against the Predator, and he doesn't stand a chance.
Well, I think the thing is, you don't really see exactly how big the Predator is compared to Arnold until not specifically until the final battle, but like until like the Predator gets him in real close and like kind of picks him up by the neck and like lifts him up. Yeah. And there's a shot. I noticed this last night. There's a shot where like it shows like both their feet, and Arnold's feet just raising up like a good 1.5 feet. I'm like, jeez.
Yeah, no, they did such a good job of showcasing the contrast between them. And I think it only works if the beginning works in setting up these characters as being the toughest and the baddest, and they're the best of the best, and they're the grittiest, and
you started going down that path, and I knew exactly where you were going with that. I'm like, how did I never get that? It never clicked in my head that's what the point of that scene was. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I'm a Predator fan.
Yeah, I think this movie does such a good job of teetering on the point of being bad. Like, it could have, there are so many points where it could have just been, this is just an alien ripoff. This is, instead of Alien in the Jungle being a positive thing, it's just Alien, but they put it in the jungle, you know.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
There were parts where, they have all these, one-liners that are just, they don't work, or this or that, but it teeters on the point of where it could be bad, but it is great. Mm-hmm. It's good and it's enjoyable, but it's not without its flaws. I know there was one scene when Arnold finds out that Carl Weathers betrayed them, and he was like, "You set us up." The acting in that scene was not
great.
No,
I was watching
wasn't.
that. I was watching that. I was like, "Oh, Arnold, no, please stop trying. You're not doing well in this scene at all." I think it does do a good job of where it could have strayed. It stays on its path, and it becomes good in its own right.
Yeah. You are definitely correct in that, saying that it easily could have been bad, because I could be wrong about this. I remember reading this a long time ago. The initial idea for Predator came from the Rocky franchise, where I think someone like made a joke like, "Oh, in the next Rocky, they should have him fight an alien," and then that just kind of snowballed into what we got as Predator.
Huh.
I don't know if that's true. I remember reading that a long time ago,
yeah.
and that could have just been some schmuck made up on the internet.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they had gone with that, it could have been an entirely different film. It could be terrible.
Well, it's kind of going back to what I was saying before. The movie began as a derivation of other films.
Yeah.
And usually that doesn't lead to a movie becoming its own unique classic. Mm-hmm. The fact that it was birthed from like, oh, well, let's take this movie and let's do this, or let's make First Blood meets Aliens.
Yeah.
The fact that the movie started from that basis and is able to be its own unique, the fact that we're able to say it's unique. And I just think that's really interesting that it could evolve like that, and then now it's its own staplehood in classic science fiction.
Yeah, it's a classic inspired by other classics.
Exactly. That's the perfect way to put it. It's a classic inspired by other classics.
I feel like I'm in the minority here on this. I love Alan Silvestri's score to death.
Yes.
It's so good, and I don't see anyone talking about this when I hear people talking about Predator.
I love Alan Silvestri, by the way.
He's a fantastic composer, but like every time I watch Predator, I always get it stuck in my head. It's stuck in my head all the time.
You know what's funny? When we were about to start the movie last night, you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna have the theme song stuck in my head again," and I thought to myself, I was like, because it's been a number of years since I've seen this movie, I was like, what's the theme? I don't even remember what the theme is. And then as soon as I heard it, I was like, there we go.
Yep,
that's
it is.
Predator.
And then halfway on back to Hurley, you did get it stuck in your head.
I did, yeah.
Yep.
I knew it was going to happen.
Yeah. No, I love Alan Silvestri. I don't think I'd necessarily... I feel like it was one of those things I knew, but I didn't remember that Alan Silvestri did the score for this film. But he's a fantastic composer, and the score in this movie is really good. It has like a militaristic sound to it, but also different. Like it's not it's not the kind of music that you would expect from a straight military movie, but it has that military aspect to it, which is what the film is.
Yeah.
It's not a straight military movie, but it definitely has very clear, strong military influences in it.
Yeah, like definitely the piece. They use it a couple times throughout the film, but I think the best use of it is when Mac is drinking after Blaine gets shot by the Predator and dies, and he's like drinking, like talking to Blaine. They have the kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like the funeral-esque music playing with the horns.
Yeah.
It's like that's very military feel.
Yeah.
And then, again, it's Alan Silvestri.
Yeah.
He's a great composer. He's working on Avengers now. I mean, come on.
I mean, I agree with you that I don't think when people talk about Alan Silvestri, they don't necessarily talk about Predator.
Yeah.
Or when they talk about Predator, they don't necessarily talk about the great score that it is. But this is a great one by Silvestri. He did a great job of it.
Yeah, because I didn't recognize the score either. Like, I didn't remember it until I watched it.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, as soon as you hear it, you know it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I would, like, well, especially since last night I couldn't remember exactly what it was. It's not one of those that I think I'm going to be able to remember on my own. Like, there's a lot of movies, like, if you say, Jurassic Park. Oh, I'm gonna remember exactly what.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But if you say Predator, I'm not gonna be like, oh,
It's like,
it's
what is it?
Yeah, but as soon as I hear it, I'm gonna be like, that's
Yeah.
Predator.
I think it's a testament to Silvestri's work, especially that like. I think he also did the music for Predator 2, but both in Predators and The Predator, they reused that theme. And I think even though he didn't do the music for either of those two movies, the fact that they reused the theme, I think, is a testament to the work he did on it.
Iconicism.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that I think that's a great point to end this off on. Is the score. So how about we just go around real quick and say what our final thoughts are on the film, starting with Crystal.
Well, basically, the point is it's a classic inspired by other classics.
Yes.
That's my point.
Yes. Dave.
For me, it's the quintessential 80s action movie. It's got a fantastic cast, fantastic dialogue, fantastic script, fantastic monster, everything. I love everything about the movie.
Yeah. And my final thoughts are, I really like this movie a lot. I definitely enjoy it. I don't think it's quite as good of a movie as some of the other movies we've watched, or even movies of its era. Like, I think Aliens is a better movie. I think Alien is a better movie. But I think it's good in its own right. It does a lot of things really well in its own right, and especially in making such a unique alien monster. It does such a great job in creating something that we hadn't seen before in other science fiction alien movies before. And I think that's a testament to the skill of Stan Winston and James Cameron for his brilliant addition to the creature. But I also just like the group dynamics. I love the camaraderie between them. I love Arnold in this movie. I think he does a really good job. I like him as Dutch.
Yeah.
And I think it's an enjoyable movie. It's an endlessly rewatchable film. And I think it is a classic inspired by other classics. And I definitely enjoy Predator a lot. So, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in the show, next week we are talking about the 1986 James Cameron classic Aliens, which is one of my all-time favorites. I am so excited to talk about the movie. Next week is going to be Aliens. That's going to be a fun one. I am looking forward to that one. So make sure to come back and join us for a discussion of 1986's Aliens. Once again, I am your host, Nathanael Molnár. Thank you so much for listening. I was joined by a great panel today, joined by Crystal Gonzalez.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. And thanks, Dave, for being here. Dave Scrivani.
Anytime.
And you can find us on all of our various social medias at Movie Night TNT. That's Movie Night TNT, as well as at Movie Paradise for the larger YouTube channel. So thanks for listening, and until next week, see you later.